There we go. Is everyone done?
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. Jono,
Yep.
Jono, introduce us.
Yeah, well, hello and welcome to Mediate 2002. A year which I chose, I mean, we know it's not randomly allocated. We have a little fight out of who's gonna choose each one, and I picked this one purely when I noticed. Purely when I noticed a certain game, and then realised I had not really seen any films from this year, and randomly picked one. But before I get into exactly that, I guess do we do honourable? It feels like it's been so long since we've done one of these. Do we do honourable mentions now, or do I say?
I think we do honourable mentions.
I think it's honourable mentions.
Honourable mentions, then TV roundup, then.
It's been about 3 months since we've done a main series podcast.
I think. What was the last one we did? What was 2003?
That was Old Boy and City of God.
Oh man, that was forever ago.
Yeah. Fucking hell. Okay. Right. I'll start with my honourable mention, being Star Wars Jedi Knight 2. Yeah, it's not one of the KOTOR games.
Damn. What even is this game?
Is this the one? I think it is. I should really have checked. I think this is Jedi Academy.
Is this Jedi Outcast? There's so many Star Wars games.
Wars: The Force Unleashed.
That's what I'm thinking, looking at it. Because I remember I did pick that one, but I've labelled it weirdly on this. But I'm pretty sure it is. If it was out 2002.
Jedi Knight 2.
God, we're rusty at this.
Jedi Outcast. Yeah, I think I have seen gameplay of it.
Yeah, so basically it's it's all non-canonical now. It's after the Empire's been destroyed, you're training to be a Jedi. There's a bit where Luke trains you, and there's Kyle Katarn around, but you get to the main strength of this is just the way it does lightsaber combat. Basically, it's one of the few games where you just really feel like you've got a lightsaber in your hand. When you hold it up against a wall, it leaves the line. It sort of has a feeling of you hit someone with it and they die basically. Getting into lightsaber fights with other people with lightsabers it kind of feels like a proper battle. You're trying to get past their defense because it's all about the blocking and a lot of doing flips over them to try and get their unprotected side. It is I think widely considered just one of the best games for getting in the lightsaber combat. It's very kind of rough in the sense that it's not the sort of thing where you just lock on and then do an executioner move. It's a proper kind of, you're just trying to get one hit that gets through their defense basically. Anyway, that's the main reason. Can't really remember much of the plot of the game or whatever. But it's just for the feeling it gives you with the lightsaber.
I'm so sad that in the brief window of motion controls, when that was a big popular thing, Wii to 360 era, we never got a proper Star Wars lightsaber game out of any of that technology. And the closest thing we got is the Wii Sports Resort sword fighting game, which is good, Ethan.
I was to say the closest we probably got was
Connect Star Wars.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that no bueno though? Isn't that you have to do the weird chest pump thing to move?
What's it? The one where you're Starkiller and you're trained by Darth Vader. That's got a Wii release. And
what?
so the
Star Wars: The Force Unleashed is on Wii.
That
was
probably
more
on
of
Wii U as
an
well.
action game, press a button to attack though. I do mean proper you are controlling the sword sort of thing. I don't know, maybe it is
I had one as a kid, where you it was like a plug and play console, where the training ball that Luke uses in the Star Wars movies on the Millennium Falcon, that's the console, and then you have the lightsaber, and you have to deflect shots, and then you fight different bosses. And I remember as a kid, it was fucking impossible. So you're not missing out on much.
So I think
Wow.
my brother might have something like that I've just seen lying around. But yeah, no, I mean, I go back to like the Force Unleashed. I've not played it on Wii. I've just watched a video of, well, it was someone going through different games and how they have like lightsaber combat basically, and saying in terms of your physical movements, then like representing the moves, Force Unleashed for the Wii is great, but it fails with like the force powers of that stuff. I think I can't fully remember. It was ages ago I watched this. Whereas this one, even for Jedi Academy, even though you're just like pressing a button to swing, basically, there's just a lot more. I don't know. It's difficult to describe, but it is properly nice going into it.
Nice.
Tony, you do know what the best sword fighting game mode is on Wii Sports Resort?
Well, I know it's the duels, isn't it? Where you're on that
No.
tiny platform.
No, there's a better one than that.
Oh, what's better than that?
It's all that one where you're kind of like jogging as well in a sense, but just like
What?
there's just like a whole wave of people that come to fight
Yeah,
you, and you
yeah.
just bop them on the head.
Oh man, you can just
Yeah,
waggle the
that's
Wii
the one.
remote and just like slice
Yeah,
through
yeah.
thousands of enemies. It's incredible.
But yeah, what you can do is if before you click the start, if you just wait because the game's still running in the background, everyone will like slowly walk up and become one large group in front of you. And then you can
funny.
literally just wiggle the controller a bit, and then you just murder everyone. It's that
That's so funny.
that's probably the best. Anyway, I feel we've spent too long on this honourable mention.
I mean, there are a lot of good Star Wars games, including Star Wars Wii Sports Resort sword fighting. But
I think I used to own a Star Wars game where, in the multiplayer, where it was like a co-op, local or something, and you could play as the same character, but if you were playing as the same character, then one of you would have like one coloured lightsaber, and the other one would have a different coloured lightsaber. So you could play as Mace Windu with like a green lightsaber, for instance, or something ridiculous like that. And General Grievous just has a gun he can pull out if you click RT.
It's like what's his name, Red Hood, in Injustice. Is it Red Hood?
Yeah, I think it is Red
Yeah,
Hood.
okay.
Good old Injustice.
I've
Got to use
I've
those
remembered-
combos.
I've remembered why actually, but yeah. So this isn't Jedi Academy. It wasn't released this year. This is Jedi Knight 2, which is the game that came before, but it's confusing because that's got a 2 behind it, and the Academy one hasn't. But this one you're like Kyle Katarn. It takes you longer before you get a lightsaber, but in terms of the game itself, all the mechanics are the same.
Ah, okay.
But it's worse than Academy because like the best thing is the lightsaber, and in this you have to like go through a lot of just being a guy with a gun before you get a lightsaber. Just if anyone like cares about the actual facts, I've just remembered that.
I mean, we've always been, hard and fast with the actual rules of how we perceive linear time in Mediate. Apparently this came out, the film we're doing came out in 2003 in the UK. We're just going to ignore that.
Yeah.
As long as it came out a year before or after, it's fine. You have to
Wait,
get
so
within
where
a
did
year.
it come out? Where did it come out in 2002? Was it like Poland or the States? Or where?
Probably, yeah.
Probably
America.
festivals. I think it won
Ah.
the Palme d'Or, so that would have been 2000, the year before.
Did they give the award to Plonsky for that as well?
I imagine so. The film won best film there.
So who wants to do their honourable mention next?
I can't really find I'll do mine. I literally have been looking for a while. I haven't found anything that I'd say I like enough to pick. But I've just realised that Punch Drunk Love came out in 2002.
Ooh.
So
Oh, what a lad!
I'll pick that. This is the Paul Thomas Anderson film, the one good Adam Sandler movie ever made.
What, you mean Waterboy?
Don't know. Imagine if
can't-
Adam Sandler but made a good film. That's this. Yeah.
I've heard he can do it.
That's the elevator pitch. Yeah.
Tony.
It's a lot of fun.
Do you know who? What other films the director of this did? One of your favourites.
Ponyo.
What? Me?
Yeah, that's it.
The director
Yeah,
of
you.
Drunk Punch Love? Or
Yeah.
Punch Drunk Love?
He's also made another one of your favourite films. Do you know which one?
Tower Heist.
No, not Terrace, I'm afraid.
I'm
There
not
will
sure.
be blood.
Wait, what genre is Punch Drunk Love? To have
Romantic
Adam Sandler
comedy.
in it, I would. What romantic comedy? And he
I'd
went
say it's
into
romantic comedy. I
then
don't know what
he,
Ethan
and
would say.
then he dived into the There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, I think he made this
That
because
was
like
straight after, I think, right?
That's a
There will
good
be blood
range
straight
on his
after?
part or her part.
he
Oh, he-
basically I think he liked Adam Sandler films and he wanted to make a good one. That was the pitch. Yeah, it's just it's
I
really
appreciate
it's really
that.
great. It's very, very surreal. I love sort of the comedy. Me and Ethan have watched a particular scene involving Philip Seymour Hoffman on the phone a lot of times. Shut up!
Yeah.
Shut!
I'd say rom-com.
it's pretty
I'd say
great.
rom-com.
Yeah, I really like this film. I've only seen
Yeah,
it
but it's-
once, but it's the best thing I can see that came out in 2002. I'm not picking Metal Gear Solid 2 because I was very close to picking that, and GTA Vice City. Those are things that I think are probably sevens. But, you know, this is the one good thing that came out this year. Apart from the thing
But
Ethan's done.
not to plant assumptions in your head or anything. When we say rom-com, we don't mean like Love Actually or some Hugh Grant film from the 90s. We actually mean like an actually really good film
Yeah,
that has
I know that
romance and comedy in it.
there are good films that are in that genre.
Yeah, it's got a twisted rom-com though. Like neither of them are entirely normal people. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
he's
also
buying a
got
lot of pudding.
Is it a bit like a rom-com in the sense that The Graduate was a rom-com? Except it had no romance or comedy, but you know.
No, it definitely has romance and comedy.
Oh,
It's
good.
just it's a very odd film. I love the fact that P.T. Anderson never makes the same film twice. Like every film he makes is so remarkably different from the last. And like the genre of this is just like it's a guy with 7 sisters who has his own company selling like toiletries, and he's buying as much pudding as possible to get unlimited air miles. Meanwhile, he's being blackmailed by like a phone sex line. It's very weird.
Interesting.
I'd say the weirdest thing about it though probably has to be what happens in like the opening 5 minutes of the film. Do you remember when the car drives down the road?
One drops the piano.
Well, the car drives down the road and then it gets into a crash and goes flying. And then another car pulls up beside Adam Sandler and then unloads a piano on him and then just drives off. We never see those guys again.
I love the Superman theory as well. The fact that
Oh, that's amazing.
like he always wears his blue suit, and his love interest always wears red. And then when they're finally together, he seems to possess some kind of superhuman strength. It's kind of a weird color theory, but I really like
That's
it. And
strange.
the fact that he's buying all these air miles as well, like he wants to fly away.
And do you remember the part where he's like running and he kind of leaps over a barrier and it looks like he's trying to fly almost, but obviously falls onto the floor.
Yeah, I really want to watch it again. I enjoyed it a lot the first time. I also need to see Boogie Nights.
Yes, you do.
All right. So I was doing a segue, but I got distracted. Probably the one other thing that I really like that came out in 2002 is a film with the worst trailer ever made. That Ethan's picked.
Yeah, that's right. So I've picked the Danny Boyle British horror film, 28 Days Later. I really like this film. I've seen it a few times now, and it never ceases to terrify me, and not in the same way that Silent Hill 2 does at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean,
God, you can't get
mean,
that gun
the-
out of
the-
the trolley.
yeah, I worked that out actually. You've just got to find the flashlight on the floor just below, and you find it, and then you can get the gun out of the trolley. Easy peasy. Anyway,
Perfect
yeah.
sense.
So yeah, no, this film is really good. It's really really scary. I just want to point that out. I think what makes it so good and like what puts you on edge all the way throughout is the fact that it has that like that Mad Max thing of almost as if they've like taken a few frames out, so everything feels quite sped up. So when the they're not called zombies, they're the infected in this. And
Infected.
They're not like and they're not like zombies. They move a lot faster, and when I say faster, I mean like at a rapid pace. It's quite ridiculous, and that really just does add to the impact they have on you.
Yeah, this was kind of like the film that kind of changed zombie fiction, and it kind of like revolutionized a lot of it, because obviously you had the George Romero Dawn of the Dead, but I think this was one of the only occasions where the zombies are quick. and that immediately kind of completely changes the dynamic. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
this, and then you get the Left 4 Dead games, and then you get this new wave of zombie fiction, which is kind of dying off now. But yeah, it's really good. It's a really good film.
Yes, yes. So there are some really, really great sequences in the film that no matter how many times you watch it, they will always like really, really terrify you. There's one in the tunnel when they're trying to change a flat tire. There's one later on in the film where there's one of the infected that's kind of running around like a mansion, and I think what I love about because it's a Danny Boyle film, and you mentioned earlier that Paul Thomas Anderson is the kind of guy who never makes the same film twice, and I think Danny Boyle is even more like that. When I'm thinking of a versatile director who really does have a lot of range, I always think of Danny Boyle, because you compare this to like Trainspotting or Slumdog Millionaire or that film where James Franco gets his arm trapped in the rock, and they're all like radically different. Like, I mean radically different. This guy has a lot of talent and a lot of skill, and it makes for some really compelling viewing. So
Yeah, Danny Boyle is probably the best at kind of adapting a screenplay, like taking the writer's vision and kind of making it for them. So I always feel like the writers lead Danny Boyle films. Like Alex Garland wrote this, and obviously he's gone on to direct Annihilation, which me and Ethan have talked about. But yeah, and Danny Boyle is very unique, and every film he makes is pretty radically different.
You said that he did that Steve Jobs film, right?
Yeah, I mean
was
that's an Aaron Sorkin screenplay. Definitely feels more like a Sorkin film than a Boyle film. It's not a criticism of him. I just think he's very good at adapting other people's scripts.
God.
Yeah.
So Aaron Sorkin's done a Facebook film, an Apple film. Do you think he's going to do a Microsoft film using that Bill Gates impersonator that Nathan for You used?
Oh, God.
Worked
Creepiest
so
guy.
hard.
You have to watch the hour-and-a-half special of where he tries to find that guy's lost love. We were making our computers in the 80s.
The computer chip.
God, I might just change my. I might just talk about Nathan for You.
God, what year did he come out in?
I have no idea. I'm pretty sure it was Canadian TV, wasn't it? Anyway,
Alright.
Tony.
My film that I picked for an honourable mention for this year is the, if I'm going to say this right, I think it's a Disney film. Yeah, produced by Disney. Is the film that... Bye. Is the Disney film that no one really talks about, because I think it lost like loads of money. Like, I'm just looking on Google here, you know, budget $140 million, box office $100 million. Ugh, you know, that's kind of like a sore spot in the memory. I see why they don't bring it up now. I haven't like gone back to it in the 16, like, can't do maths, 17 years since it came out. But yeah, this was just a Treasure Planet, of course. The name of the film is adapting the Treasure Island story into this incredibly like unique, like almost like sci-fi but still pirate themed like setting, which is really unique. I haven't seen anything like it, you know, apart from, I don't know, maybe you could call like D&D settings, like if I'm right, like Spelljammer. It's sort of this style of thing. But anyway, it's just like this you know, something I it takes that story, which is really interesting, of obviously just go to this place, this island in this place. I think it's like a planet, obviously Treasure Planet instead of an island. They go to it and there's like loads of treasure there, and it's just about getting there, you know, getting back. And it's just a really good adventure story. I think the animation is incredible. You know, I just remember so many great like fluid, you know, like action scenes where there's one early on where he's like on a skateboard and it's like, oh my god, that's so cool. But it's like a space skateboard, and of course there's, you know, loads of like, oh man, you know, the boats, space boats, like flying about, you know, in space, you know, doing loads of cool shit, escaping from, you know, I think there's a big bomb at the end. It's a whole thing. It is really worth watching. And again, you know, I think all the characters, you know, being aliens, you know, they're really unique. There's this great, you know, like the main character is good, but I think there's like this side character who's like this, robot cyborg that just has like an arm that can like is like mechanical and can just like swivel and change into loads of different things, and I always thought it was the coolest thing, and just it's a great sense of action, adventure, and apparently it's a romance film as well. Must have missed that. Must be more gay subtext that I can't see in films. But it's really good. It's really good.
That character you were talking about, the one who has the arm that can shift, is that the captain of the ship?
I think it is. Yeah. I think he is the captain or one of the captains. But yeah. He's got a robot leg as well, and there's also like a robot guy, and there's a doctor as well. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure he's called Long John Silver, that guy.
Yeah,
and the main character is called Jim Hawkins. I think they're not like you said, they're based on characters from Treasure Island, Robert Louis Stevenson's book or whatever he's called.
And that's such like a cool idea, right? Is to take this really old story and be like, all right, Treasure Island, but what can we do with it, And like normally that's super lame, right? They take Macbeth, right, and they say, all right, but what if they had AK-47s? And it's just shit. But this Treasure Planet, you're like, holy fuck, is in space instead of in the ocean, but it's still basically the same concept, and they just use it to tell loads of loads of great action pieces and great set design, great aliens. I think the aliens in this are better than the aliens in Star Wars. Star Wars has got those weird what's it called? Those things that George Lucas added into the Blu-ray version of all the films that walk in front of the frame, and I always forget the names. Jubex. That might be it. I think that is it. But in this,
what, are they like the
space
yak-looking
whales?
things?
It's way cooler. Anyway, has anyone else
They
seen
the
it
yak-looking
or heard of
things.
it?
I don't
things
think
that-
I've seen it, but I had this is such a weird thing. Golden Nuggets and Cookie Crisp were giving away a free DVD
This is so
game.
niche.
Yeah, I know. And I had that as a kid. So it was a collection of 3 mini games with to do with Treasure Island for PC. And I played that a lot as a kid. So
What
I
did
know
you
it
think?
from that.
What did you
I
think?
mean, I liked those games as a kid. I don't think I've seen the film, but I will say that Muppets Treasure Island is the definitive take.
I mean, I do think Muppets is also a very strong way, like how you can take a setting and either give it the AKs, put it in space, put it in modern day, put it with Muppets is a great is a great.
I think
way of adding
mentioning
a new
Muppets
flavour
in
to a
every
story.
podcast is my new letdown. I've given up on letdown and started to talk about Muppets and everything we do.
All right, well, I can live with that.
Mediate, but with Muppets.
But yeah,
It's so
Treasure
much
Planet, really good. And
I've
it's
also
a shame
seen
it
the
lost
film.
money because I think it definitely deserves it. So is that the roundup now? If I'm correct.
Yeah.
I just hang on. I just want to mention really quickly, in Treasure Planet, there is that fantastic part where they open the portal that takes them to the actual place where all the gold
portal
is, and
at
that's
the end
fantastic.
Is incredible.
Yes,
and it's
also, no, go on. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, and also those fucking things from Star Wars, are they the yak-looking things?
Yeah.
They move really
there's,
slowly. Is that what you were talking about? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm glad I got that cleared up because I was really confused.
Yeah, they're really bad. I don't like the aliens in Star Wars that much. I don't know why. It's a sci-fi thing. It should have good aliens, but it just doesn't. Apart from Chewbacca, that's it.
Well, speaking of sci-fi things, but without the aliens, my TV roundup for this year is Firefly. 'Cause it's been a while since I've watched it, but I'm pretty sure there's no aliens. So it's what is the one? I mean, basically, this is sci-fi western. Like properly, that's just the feel it has. It's got Nathan Fillion being a captain of a crew that, well, half of it is like an established crew that's been there for a while, and like the other half is just a group that ended up joining from the like first episode and just sort of going along. I think it's famously like the series that got cancelled after like the first one, but everyone wants to see more because it asks, it sets up quite a few things, and then just of course there's no payoff for any of it, which I think is possibly why it's almost so liked, is because there was never the chance to muck up on the
exactly
on the way it delivered. It's a good setup.
Is this Joss Whedon's show?
Yes.
Cool. And then Serenity obviously was the film.
Yes, yeah.
Well, Serenity was done to kind of tie up loose ends, right?
Yeah, I still need to see Serenity.
It's a good film. Good film, Serenity. I liked it.
Are you
It's not
going
the
to save
Matthew
it for the
McConaughey
worst day
film
of
that
your
came out
life?
this year, called Serenity, which is a thing.
Hmm?
There's a film that came out this year called Serenity, starring Matthew McConaughey.
Wait, as in 2019 this year?
Yep,
That's crazy.
No way.
Madness.
and it's set to be one of the worst of the year from what I've heard.
Oh, don't say that. I like
God.
Matthew McConaughey.
How the mighty have fallen. I guess Serenity was a tragic misstep in our evolution. That was such an obvious joke that I had to do it anyway. I like how Firefly, in the character that Nathan Fillion has, it has essentially given him a career out of being that character again in multiple other things. For instance, in Destiny, he's like this smart talking, which in Destiny, this like sci-fi, game, he's this, smart talking, kind of bounty hunter type. And in Halo 5 Guardians, he is, Buck, and he's also an ODST as well, he's this, smart talking, soldier type. And I assume he's got a quick wit and is very funny in Firefly, just because I've seen all the descendants, all the clones of the original Nathan Fillion character, and he just does that really well, and I'm like, yeah, that's great.
So yeah, he is. I mean, the problem is it's been ages since I watched it, so I can't fully remember. But he is the kind of Han Solo leader, sort of, and also like
Kind
never
of
abandons
smuggler,
a crewmate
bit of a
type
seedy
thing.
past, Oh man.
Yeah, I mean the whole world. So it's it's sci-fi but without aliens.
Good.
And I think can't fully remember the idea, but I think basically America and China form some sort of alliance, and then they're basically this massive,
Interesting.
I think, overly controlling government of everything. But it means that just in the world there are like characters that speak Mandarin, and you see Mandarin written around the place as well, next to English, because.
And it's not just that. Sometimes when the characters are speaking to each other on the ship, they do say sometimes when they're like swearing or something, they'll do it in Chinese. It's like made its way into
That's
their
really
own language,
interesting.
into English.
I like that. I think,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty common, like a sci-fi trope, to have that. I think, Blade Runner has, what is it, Japanese or Chinese, on like written on the walls, but I like that, has spoken. I wonder how if the actors' pronunciation is anywhere near like being accurate, because I imagine it's a very difficult language to speak correctly, because it's so much about intonation and pitch and all that difficult stuff.
I also want to say that that what another thing about the show that's so impressive is the fact that all of the crew members are such like unique and individual characters, separate from each other. Like they all have their own personality that's their own. Like you said, you got Nathan Fillion, you've got I can't remember the name of the actor, but the guy who plays the big tough macho guy who's a bit dim sometimes. And then you've got
Adam Baldwin's the actor. Jane Cobb is the guy's name, because it is
That's
funny,
right,
'cause he's
yeah.
called Jane. I think there's a bit where he wears a woolly hat, and that's just brilliant. I don't know why, but I just really like seeing this tough guy in a wool hat.
Yeah, and then you've got Kaylee, that's her name. She's one of the best characters, and she's kind of like a ditzy, always light-hearted, in a good mood kind of character. They're just a really, really great crew, and they work together, and the chemistry's fantastic as well.
Yeah, you've got again the pilot Wash played by Alan Tudyk.
Oh
That's
yeah.
great. Um, and you've got the shepherd guy, uh, the like random doctor that's around with his like weird sister.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
so like even like again, it was ages ago I've seen it, but all these characters do still know them and would recognize them.
Yeah, and there's like it's not just them. There's kind of there's side characters and villains, and they're all really great as well. In fact, the final episode of Firefly is one that I've gone back and rewatched more than others because of the bounty hunter in it, Jubal Early, who comes down to try and find the Doctor and his sister, and he's just such a funny, great character because the things that he says and oh no, honestly, you should just go and watch that one episode because he's so good. Jonathan, do you remember the character that I'm talking about?
Nah, it's been too long.
Yeah, but he just says these really kind of strange, kooky things, and he just asks the characters on board the ship just really random questions that don't really have any bearing on the plot, but they're just great and oh, so good. And there's also that I won't go on about it too much, but there's also that one character. I can't remember the actress's name, but she was in Mad Men, and she basically crops up every now and then, and she plays. Well, the first time we see her, she gets married to Nathan Fillion, and then every time that you see her again, she's got like a new husband, and it's just so good because there's like the running joke about how she's married pretty much everyone in the galaxy for some sort of manipulative reason.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic show, really. Jonathan's right. It's really
Yeah, I need to rewatch it. It has been too long.
You know, it's a fantastic show, and it's got Lee Tompkins from Gotham in it. That's how you know it's good.
Gotham.
That's real TV.
So, are we...
I didn't get cancelled after one season. Gotham.
Damn. What a shame.
I'm sure it's good. I need to watch Firefly.
If I could exchange all of Gotham for more Firefly, for one extra episode of Firefly, that'd be a good trade.
But does Firefly have Clayface?
Well, I mean, it could have Clayface. The extra episode of Firefly would reveal that everyone was in fact Clayface the entire time.
That'd be the best. Alright, should we actually get on to doing the podcast?
Yeah, which
Half
one
an
are
hour
we doing
into it.
first, I was going to say.
I feel like we'll try and quickly go through Age of Mythology just because.
Alright.
I don't know. I feel we won't have much to say, but anyway, I mean, this was the reason I was happy to get this year because this is a game from my childhood. You know, it's potentially one of the first games I've played. I don't know, but it's like real time strategy. It's where I get like most of my knowledge of like ancient Greek mythology basically, and all of Norse mythology as well. It's sort of all nicely in here. It's I don't know. It's just such a fun little game. I've spent many hours in my youth playing through it, and has a campaign that I like still remember bits of, even though I haven't played it for like probably since I was around like 12 maybe. But yeah, no, and yeah, so I just kind of wanted to force you guys to play bits of it, and then sort of realised very quickly that it probably wouldn't be your sort of games, and that I would have massively rose-tinted glasses. But still, I'm glad I managed to like share some of the madness of it with you, which
Yeah, there's definitely madness in there. You know, we've got more bandits being our recurring
bandits.
Kraken black sails.
That is just it was just so like between me and my brother we just got this kind of meme because there's just a bit in a cutscene where just this old man like runs up to the heroes and just goes, "More bandits," and that just became a meme between me and my brother. It was just a thing we could say because you can always say it in games because like that's that's just how it does everything. It's just like, well, more enemies or more whatever. So you can just go more bandits, and I remember like I managed to like spread it because I remember Ethan saying it at one point, and I was just like, oh wow, this like little known game, that's tucked in my childhood. This little goofy scene is slowly spreading out. It's goofiness.
How much did you play? Replay? Did you replay the whole campaign, or?
No, I didn't replay the whole campaign because I just sort of I wasn't particularly in the mood to go back to it. To be honest, I like played a few games, mucked around with the cheats, got
That's a good
a few
sign.
missions into the campaign.
How do you think it holds up?
Holds up well enough.
On a technical level, like it wasn't running like garbage, like it did work. Apart from
Yeah,
I had
I
a
mean-
massive bug where if I would alt tab out of the game and then alt tab back in, my mouse would like desync, so that I had to like my mouse's actual position would be like somewhere up and to the right of where my cursor would be, and so I had to like use my sixth sense or whatever to like click and save my game so I could exit out using my mouse, but I was like clicking on a different part of the screen to click the exit menu and all that. It was just like, oh no, I shouldn't have alt tabbed. But it's just so natural to just do alt tab. Like I did it like multiple times just on reflex to go do something else, and I was like, fuck, I've broken it.
I can't ever remember having any like technical issues with it. But yeah, no, I mean the textures
It does
are
run alright.
dated, but that's what you'd expect. But
I mean,
everything,
HD texture packs are on Steam. They don't look that great, but in fact, I think
mean,
the
the
default ones probably look better.
I think we can't doing old games. Like you can't criticize. I think visually it does hold up. Although I was playing
I don't know.
I'm not playing the original version. I'm playing the kind of the best way
Yeah.
of getting it on Steam.
yeah, same for me going back. But again, rose tinted glasses, I didn't notice much difference between my memories of it as a child and now. But then I wasn't caring about that back, so I can't say for certain.
Yeah, I think it holds up.
The characters don't look as bad as PS1 Harry Potter, though. I just want to point that out. They are still all right. I mean, at least their faces stay the same. Like they don't shift states of matter.
But yeah, a real strength of this, I feel, is you've got all the like mythical units. You've got like little tidbits about lots of little gods if you're just playing like a custom game, because you get to choose which like
your
lower
sub
level
god.
gods you worship.
Oh yeah, I really remember that. I really remember that laser shooting bear in those Greek mythology books that I used to see when I was younger.
I should have checked out the laser better. I never got around to it.
You should have. Well, first I'll continue like the serious part of the point, which is like every unit and every mythical unit has this like massive piece of writing about it. I think it's not massive, but like fairly sizable piece of writing about it, saying like where it comes from and all this sort of stuff. It has a feeling of a well researched game basically, and it feels like you could like learn off it and all little things and all of that. And then on the other side you have the cheats that you can do, which are just, I mean, just the names of them are hilarious as well. But some of the things they do. So you've got O Canada, which summons a teleporting laser bear that has two monkeys that follow it around, and it wears a cape with the Canadian flag on it, and it's just overpowered. You've got the flying purple hippo that vomits love hearts, I think, and leaves a trail of rainbows behind it. And just reading the description of that is brilliant, because it's like they've copy and pasted a Wikipedia article about it, but every now and again they interrupt it in capital letters going except when they fly and things like that. And it's just a brilliant piece of comedy hidden within a cheat. It's great.
Jonathan, can you tell us a little bit about the storyline? Because I can't quite remember. I know that the main character goes on a quest for some reason, because it starts off... Does it start off in his... I say hometown, I mean, it is more like a city, but he starts off
in Atlantis. It's Arkantos. It starts off with him having a dream, Arkantos, main character, about the times he was basically a great warrior battling. Like Athena talks to him. But he then gets embroiled in this pirate chase, and then he goes to the siege of Troy because they need to help out the guy who's doing the siege basically. So they go and then come up with the idea of the Trojan horse. Go and do that. Go and find that.
That's
then yeah. Then on their way back, they bump into this old man who says more bandits. That's an important part of the plot. They end up meeting Chiron, who then leads them to I think people are being abducted or whatever, and becoming slaves to do this big mining operation. Turns out that this Cyclops guy is trying to... Well, you don't find that out now, but basically he's trying to get into the underworld. No, you do find that out. You end up jumping through into the underworld for a bit and find... Well, he's trying to release the Titans that were originally the rulers of the world back into the world. Can't remember exactly why. Probably just complete chaos. And so you stop him. Then you end up leaving, and you're in Egypt for a bit. And then I think some Titans do get released, and then so you try and stop it by releasing Gaia, who is also a Titan, but is the mother of all the Titans. And then I think you sort of win round there. Again, this is I just quickly skimmed some stuff to refresh my memory. I haven't properly played. There's a whole more details, but that's the rough thing of it.
Okay.
And then you've got another campaign, which is because Atlantis gets destroyed because it's not here in real life, and so the people who do live there are trying to resettle, or find somewhere new, and so there's this kind of religious figure basically who tells them to go to this new land, and so they follow that, and then it turns out that the guy who you were following was evil and was worshipping the Titans, and then you have to you realize that you've been led to Olympus and I don't think you've killed you've done something to disrupt the gods or whatever, and then you have to go and undo the bad you've done. But that's the campaign up. Well, from memory, probably is the best, just for the kind of twist and interesting thing, and that there is just a mission where you go up Olympus, basically.
All right.
Oh, that's cool.
So, who finished the campaign then?
I got to Egypt, and then I was like, oh, okay, this is going to go on for a very long time.
Yeah.
So I stopped. That's
I
as far as...
also stopped quite early on.
I mean, Egypt's not that... I mean, it's about half. I did about half of it.
Where'd you stop, Tony?
Before the Siege of Troy. That sounds like I didn't play the game at all. It's because most of the time I spent on this game was just testing out all the various custom maps, whatever they're called, between the AI. So I just did loads of games like that because I wanted to. The way I saw it is the actual missions were just they felt like very slight variations on the base of the game, early on. And I wanted to actually understand what the game itself was, because early on it gives you all right, this mission you start with like 5,000 wood, so you don't have to bother about getting wood, in this one. And I thought it was like, all right, it's just going to do sort of, baby mode stuff like that, and I want to actually understand, I want to do missions that don't like take parts of the game out so that you don't have to play, or just, because I think it suits that more, especially since, I don't know, I just the sort of long form campaign, like, I don't know, it didn't really give like much of a sense of progression that I cared about. So it's like,
yeah, no, that's fair enough. Like, my main experience is doing like the custom maps and things, and just spending too long on one game to the point where your enemy is literally just like one building left, and you're just having fun building a ridiculous settlement of walls, and that's what I've done. I spent way too much time. The markets you get at the end, with like the donkeys or the ox or
I didn't understand
llamas, depending. The way they work is they go from the market to a settlement, and then wander back, and they just magically get gold, because that's how trading works.
oh, okay.
And they get more gold depending on how long the journey is they take. So it's not like the distance, it's how long the journey is. So one of the things I spent a lot of time on doing is like building the opposite side of the map, and then building basically a kind of maze.
That's
so that they
ridiculous,
have to spend ages walking.
but I love it.
So you end up with like getting a ridiculous amount of gold, but it takes ages for them to get there. It's
that's so funny.
That's one of the things I remember.
It's difficult when you pick something like this, because the campaign is so obviously not what the game is. It's merely a vessel for the actual game.
Yeah.
A bit like Star Wars Battlefront 2, where the campaign is kind of a vessel for doing what the game is intended to do, which is pretty much playing multiplayer. I find it's always hard to review these kind of things.
I do think
by playing,
that,
you're not getting the
like,
full experience by doing the campaign. I always feel.
I do think that people, like, it reminds me of sort of like, or when Titanfall like 1 in brackets first came out, people were like, oh, it doesn't have a campaign, and it was like, yeah, but if it had half-assed a campaign and reviewers had gone to it and like us, and had just played the campaign, which is where they had sort of just put it in for the sake of it, and like had it not been as much effort as Titanfall 2 eventually got, then they would have gotten a warped impression of the game just by virtue of them having that option to play the game in that way, whereas restricting it to having just multiplayer was put the emphasis on what the strengths of the game were. But I get that the campaign is there for people that want it in this. And
there are a lot of campaigns as well. Like, they obviously they have all these these different god powers, and they're clearly very, very knowledgeable about the history of the mythology or history, and they wanted to kind of get that across. So from like looking at all the different campaigns, it seems like if the central hook of the gameplay interests you, which I have to admit it's not a thing I'm a big fan of, then there is a lot of content here, and it's definitely holds up in terms of value for money.
So there's one mission where you this is not one of the 2 campaigns I've mentioned, but I think part of it is you're trying to protect the dwarves as they move Mjolnir's hammer just around. So not Mjolnir's hammer, or Thor's hammer, but Mjolnir. So yeah, there's just lots of little bits of history. Yeah, well, not history, but mythology.
Well, I didn't play very much of it either, so at some point I would like to go back and complete the game, because I quite like it. And I know you said, Harry, that it doesn't really pique your interest that much, but I think mythology, especially Greek, is really, really interesting. I used to have a book. It was like a book of Greek myths that I had when I was a child, and I used to read all of them so many times. So I just thought I thought they were just like fantastic stories. And there's the one about Icarus flying too close to the sun, and they all have like really interesting messages underneath.
Yeah,
them
I'm not saying the
as well.
mythology is not interesting. I'm saying I don't like RTS games. The central hook of real-time strategy, I can't get on board with.
I thought you were talking about how you didn't find the story all that interesting.
Oh,
that's
no, man.
why I didn't.
I love God of War. I used to like Percy Jackson. I got nothing
We
against
all
Greek
used to like
mythology,
Percy Jackson, Harry.
man. But anyway, like a lot of the things you mentioned, I think God of War does touch upon those notes. But the thing with God of War is a genre of game I like and enjoy. Whereas I don't know, I think perhaps you like RTS more than me, John. It seems.
Yeah, no, I do, and I can respect that this isn't your thing. You know, I'm not going to attack you for that.
Yeah, because
you've given it a try, and I'm glad.
When it comes to strategy with me, I really like to take my time, like be thorough, and
sort of XCOM 2.
Yeah.
Not XCOM.
Yeah, I like strategy games where you can take your time, or I like action games where it's like an immediate kind of like you're kind of pixel by pixel. You know, you're like your head really close to the screen. You're watching kind of for every little movement. But this RTS is kind of like a weird blend of the two, which I don't really like.
Yeah.
Like it's you can't really sit back and relax and take your time because you'll be like planning 3 steps ahead. Like, okay, so I'm going to send the villagers here, and then you'll just get attacked and kind of. You'll be frantically navigating all these little menus to try and remember how to do certain things.
Yeah.
But once you memorize where all those points are on the menu, then it becomes easier to navigate. And it should also be about thinking in your feet and knowing what's the best course of action to do in the moment.
But for me, I don't know.
I like action games and I like strategy games. I just don't. For me, anyway, RTS doesn't work as a genre. Like when you've got all these different menus and like you have to select each individual villager and. I think I like FTL. I like the ability to pause, take my time, and think.
Especially since you can pause in this game. You just have to use the escape, or not even the escape button. You can't use the escape button. You have to use the mouse, which is bad when you Alt-tabbed and it desyncs your mouse. But anyway, you have to press like the button in the top right that will pause the game. And so if you wanted to, you could pause, stop, and think. But it covers your screen with the pause menu and you can't move. So I'm like, great. They've made this. No, fair enough. I understand not wanting to use pause as like a game mechanic, because if it's multiplayer, if you're fighting a human being, then you can't pause. You know, it has to be on your feet. But then I don't know.
Yeah, I get the appeal of like 1v1. You've got the same amount of time, and how do you prioritize that time? But you don't really get that across in the campaign because it's you're playing against an AI, and the AI, especially when you've got a story related mission, will often just sit back and kind of let you. I don't know. I find that every map it's the same kind of grind to get like you're making villagers and then you're slowly building up an army, and then if an attack goes wrong, especially if you're doing a story mission, which are quite easy, attack goes wrong, then you have to do that grind again. And I don't know. It's a weird thing because I don't like. I think this is a very good RTS game, but I just don't like the genre. So it would be like if I picked a very good horror game and Tony just didn't like horror and didn't like it. You know, unrelated note.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There are
like
some
horror.
good custom maps that change it up a bit. So there's like one where everyone starts off on this tiny little island with very limited resources, and then eventually you have to make this move onto the big mainland and then like. Try and find if you're slow, you've got to try and find a coast that hasn't already been settled on, basically. And others where it's just like, right, there's not much wood in this one, or there's not much wood.
I got a sense of that doing the random maps, that sometimes you're like, okay, there's less wood in this one. But at the same time, it's like, well, I guess I just build less of the things that need wood then. Great, you know. I don't know.
I feel like the campaign has like a decent amount of variation from like what the base
but that's the thing though. I didn't want to just
not too much. There wasn't enough variation that kind of kept me interested throughout. Like I really like the missions where like the Siege of Troy, where you're doing something a bit like something interesting, or missions that I will like immediately put you on the back foot, or give you a set amount of units, and then you don't really have the time to build. You have to kind of think with what you've got. But there's not enough of that variation there for me to keep me entertained.
For me, it was more I didn't want to go into it and immediately start looking at all the variations, such as the different missions, or start playing with, all the different gods, because I wanted to okay, I think variation should come once you've decided what the core of the game is, once you've got a core of the game that is, fun and engaging. I wanted to see okay, how is the actual base game super default, everything on its minimal settings, everything, no crazy nonsense enabled. just how the base goes, and then all right, if I understand that, then I'll be able to learn how variation comes in and affects that, that system. But I just never really got a sense of where the engagement comes out of the main loop of, I guess, setting up your resource generation and then spending it on the units and winning the game.
I think there is a lot of depth here, because the one thing that this does that a lot of RTS games don't is by giving you the god powers, and that's obviously like in a market which was densely populated with RTS games in the early 2000s. This made it stand out. So like this isn't just Age of Empires, is it? This isn't just Red Alert, because you have these kind of niche god powers, and like instead of just wood and gold, you have I can't remember what it's called now.
The favor, whatever it's called.
Yeah, which gives you, and like I like that unique element, but
each faction has a different way of getting the favor as well.
I'd need to spend so much more time to kind of get any sort of sense of depth. This would be me picking Diablo or like Overwatch or something, which has so much depth, and then giving you guys 6 hours. You're never going to get a sense of the whole game. You can only really tell if that kind of core gameplay loop is rewarding. And
I would say, you could play it. You could be. I don't think the things are mutually exclusive, though. That say the complexity. I'm not really sure if I'd call it depth that this game has. Like, it's not that you can have that, like, say Overwatch, it has, depth, it has that complexity and its breadth of options, 27 heroes now. But at the same time, you could just give anyone who's ever played Call of Duty, give them Soldier 76 and they will have fun, They don't have to understand how, I don't know, what's his name, Wrecking Ball's fucking hook interacts with Lucio's speed boost to get to point B in under 6 seconds or whatever, You don't have to have that meta, like, you don't have to solve it as like a maths problem, before you can have fun with it. Just the base of it is fun, which I would argue that Age of Mythology is not.
Yeah.
I also feel like this might have just been me, but with especially how the game works and the controls and what options you have as a god, I feel like they threw you in a bit too quickly and tried to explain it. Yeah, exactly. I feel like in the tutorial or so, they literally just said, okay, here's everything you can do, learn it. And I feel like it should have been a bit more gradual. Like, they show you a bit here and there that's relevant to this mission, and the next mission that you play. Depending on what the mission objective is, they show you a little bit more until you're about 4 or 5 missions in, and you're like, actually, no, you know what, we can take.
So
we can take the bump.
Like, it had taken 3 missions for them to show you what the god power does, or how favor works.
I feel like the god power and favor was the thing at the time that was making this series different from the other Age of games. So I feel like they had to front load that stuff. They had to be the god power. This is our niche.
There's a trade off with marketing. If you have to show all your cool stuff as soon as possible versus explainability and I don't know.
And I feel this is in the time, but like before the good tutorials, where like most games are just kind of like, oh yeah, here's everything. It's difficult for me to relate to just because. I don't know, I just know the game. I don't remember ever having to do the tutorial. As far as I'm aware, I was born being able to play this game.
Yeah, that's definitely fair enough, especially with a game like this. But I guess my problem is that I've never really, apart from Red Alert 2, which I kind of got into a tiny bit as a kid, and I used to think was quite fun, unless you're playing with someone who's at a similar level to you, local, that's the only real enjoyment that I could ever get out of any of these games. And I didn't really have that with this one. I'm sure I don't doubt the qualities of the game as an RTS, but I just don't get on with the genre. So there's not a lot I can do to make myself enjoy it more. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Should we get round to numbering? Because I feel like we've had most of the points.
I'm curious to see what Ethan thinks of it. Like, I know he's definitely more positive than me and Tony are.
Should we sandwich it with the good scores and have Harry in the middle?
Yeah, I just wondered if Ethan had anything else to say about it.
No. I said, well, I mean, like pretty, as in this isn't like a criticism or anything like that, but like so many of the podcasts that we've done before, I feel like you guys have just said what I've said before I've said, so you've covered a lot of bases. But I'll definitely,
like the band.
yeah. I'll definitely talk about it when I'm reviewing it in a second. But I feel like I have mentioned some things that I like and dislike about it. Like I like the lore and just
wondering.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, in all fairness as well, I think I probably even played less than Tony, so I don't think I've had quite the.
I mean,
the
I
depth.
have on Steam 8 hours, and I think some of that might have been, idle time.
Yeah, well, I probably played about 5 or 6
out of the menu.
Oh,
yeah.
How many have I played? Yeah, I've played about that. I do want to play more because I feel like I'm giving it a bad rap.
If we were all in a room and we could, somehow get local multiplayer to work, I think we would have fun with it. But it is the same. I don't know. I don't really think that the system on its own is engaging enough. I think from an game design standpoint, I don't think it provides enough interesting choices because everything just feels too granular. You're doing it and you're like, okay, I'm gonna get my villagers and I'm gonna send them to do faith and gold and wood and food, and I'm like, okay, I've got I don't know, that's 4 things and I've got 13, so I put 3 in each of them and I've got 1 left over, and I'm like, okay, what difference is 1 extra villager in any one of these resources going to make? It never felt like I was sort of committing to a play style or understanding how my choices were impacting the system in a reasonable way, other than just, I guess I'll just make as many villagers as possible and get as much of the numbers as possible, as high as possible. And granted, I do see the appeal of numbers going up and making a big army and then going and destroying your enemy. I've played RuneScape, I'll just sit there and have numbers go up all day, but I think then you have to have the appeal rely on something else, and for when it's just a short a short mission that you will just win or lose at the end, I don't think there's that much investment you get in just seeing the big numbers, in my opinion. I would be, as cool as Jono's thing is of finding the way of just using a maze to make infinite gold by going from exploiting the market system, then the game would just end. And okay, I guess I'll do that again next game. I don't know.
Yeah, the campaign's definitely not the best way to experience the game. And also, unlike something a certain horror game that might be picked, I'm just trying to relate. I don't feel let's just say that by not finishing the campaign, I feel like I've seen pretty much everything that the game is going to offer. I know there's going to be variation. There's different. Egypt seemed like it had a kind of a different spin to it, but I feel like even though I haven't completed the story, I've seen it all, and the story in itself isn't kind of the main reason to play it. Basically, I'm trying to justify why I think I can review this without finishing it. Although,
I mean,
it's a bit like FTL,
IGN or anything. Actually, that's a terrible example. IGN will not finish games.
This is a bit like FTL though, where I don't think you have to finish it to talk about it because it's a strategy game.
Yeah. I think well, FTL you could make, and say with undisclosed horror game, you could make the argument that what if it's just too hard, you don't have to finish it. And in this, it's what if it's just too long.
Yeah.
But,
all right.
Yeah.
We were going to give it scores. Sorry, I
Who wants to go first?
How do we normally start?
I thought we had a clockwise order. Should we go in the order that's the Discord column? Ethan, do you want to go first? Actually, no, I don't want to end. Oh, fuck it.
Shall I just set the tone, except it's not going to be the tone.
I'll volunteering this tribute.
Yeah, so I mean, it's from my childhood. I love the quirky bits of it. I think it's a good RTS. I've grown up with it, so I know its things. I've tested the limits of what it will allow me to do, and find that fun, and do enjoy that kind of what the increasing numbers and the kind of I don't know the real time struggle of you're there just kind of right. I know I'll get him on woodcutting and him on woodcutting, and oh shit, half my base has been destroyed. I should have moved my army over there. I don't know that has that's something that works for me. I'm gonna give it an 8. I feel,
Strong. Powerful.
which will be quite massively higher than everyone else. I feel.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Who wants to go next? Harry, do you want to go?
I don't know. Are we doing it in order of score? Because I think Ethan would probably be.
Yeah, no, I can go
I don't want
next.
to end on a sour note. Alright, fine. Never mind. Ethan, you can go. Or Harry, fucking, who cares?
No, I'll go. So this is definitely a game that I want to play more of, and I'm a bit disappointed with myself that I haven't played more, so I can't talk about it as much as I'd like to. I know that you said, Harry, that you don't necessarily have to finish the game to be able to talk about it, and I do get that, but I feel like I should definitely have played more, and that's on me. But I do like it. I think the story is really good and really interesting, and I mean, like I said, I like the whole fantasy element of old ancient mythology and legends and things like that. Really, really interesting, and something that I want to be an active part in. I also quite like what you said, the whole FTL side of it, where I can't remember, I don't know enough about video games as you do, but what did you call it? As in the, what type
RTS,
of game is it?
real-time strategy.
Yeah, there we go. Because it reminds me a bit of Populous, actually, in the sense that...
Yeah, I was going to say it reminded me of Populous.
Yeah, it's not like a... I mean, I wouldn't say it's a particularly non-linear game. I mean, yeah, you do have to follow a story and you do have certain goals, but I feel like the way that you can go about achieving that is can be non-linear, and you can like strategically think about it and how many men am I going to send over here, and what am I actually trying to achieve here? I think that's good. But at the same time, it did cost me a lot of money to buy. And I am going to bring up the fact that her story has the best price to enjoyment ratio of all time. So, I mean, I am going to think of games like that ever since I've played that. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I'm going to give it the benefit of a doubt.
Price to enjoyment ratio, but when you factor in time for like her story, you just beat, and then you can't do it again.
I mean, yeah, sure, but I mean, since then I have gone back and I've rewatched certain clips and gone back to see if my opinion has changed on it.
Fair enough.
Or anything, what I think happened. But I mean, you are right. You can't really play it again from scratch.
Like compared to this, which if you found the core game engaging in some way, then you would be like, holy shit, there's so many maps, so many different gods, so many sub gods I could choose as I was playing. If I cared about how those influenced the core game, then you'd get a lot of value out of that. I feel it was
yeah.
Maybe I'm not a broke uni student yet, though. My perception of money is different.
Yeah. Can I do my score?
Shoot.
Well, in terms of value, I think this game has a lot of value for money. Like in terms of like the various very long campaigns, if you're into that kind of thing, and all the different maps, all the different kind of mythologies and gods, different gods you can focus on, the different playstyles. There's a lot of bang for your buck if you like RTS games. Problem is, I don't like RTS games. It's very simple. We've tried to make I've tried to make the issue more complex, but what it comes down to is I don't enjoy the central loop of this game. I find it a little bit repetitive and boring. The constant kind of grind to finish every mission. There wasn't enough variation. Every kind of one starts with, yep, you build your men, you see the numbers go up, and then you launch the attack, and then you finish, and then you do that again. And I was really lacking the multiplayer dynamic that makes these games work for me. The only one I've ever enjoyed was because I used to just play it with a friend, and we didn't really know what we were doing, and we kind of figured it out together. I think that's probably where a lot of John's love for it comes from. Also, when you have a more when you've played the game for longer and you have a more in-depth knowledge of its systems and its menus, then it does become like second nature. You can just, like, without even thinking of it, do all that grind at the start and get to the fun part where you've got these two armies and you're fighting against each other. Whereas for me, I'm still working out how to navigate the menus. Well, meanwhile, I'm being attacked, and I'm kind of thinking, you know what, I would like to think a little bit more. I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of it, but I don't want to be too harsh on it because I also know that if I'm looking at it objectively, I know you can't be objective, but if I'm looking at the qualities it has, I see the good in it. I see why this is a very popular game, and I think I'll probably give it a 4. That's maybe a little bit harsh, but yeah, I think I'll give it a 4 because I think unlike some things that I've given a 5 that I probably feel similarly to. I don't know. I'm never going to be compelled to go back to this, even though I know I probably should, because I didn't play it enough. I'm sorry. I find it quite boring.
Yeah, I think it is fair to say that it is a matter of taste, but on the other hand, it is the fact that like certain genres are just really bad. Like JRPGs, they just suck, you know. They're just really boring. You navigate menus and you grind over and over again. And when you have that, you have to think, okay, either I reinvent this genre in a way that fuck, my computer's gone. Oh no, I'm still recording. You either reinvent the genre in a way and you make it like fluid, you make it like, okay, you actually consider what parts of it are engaging, where is the player like thinking about their choices and then getting feedback on those choices and saying, okay, how well did they do in that you know, microcosm of the gameplay loop. You know, Bungie always talk about, you know, 30 seconds of gameplay should be your entire game, and I don't think this has that. This has the, you know, 30 seconds of, you know, looking at your villagers mining or whatever. And then it has, you know, the combat later on, which, you know, plays differently. And I don't think you get enough, you know, moment to moment engagement. And so, you know, I think I do understand that, like, okay, well, if the RTS elements are that strong, I understand, like, okay, but I really like this for the theme. I really like this for, even though it is, you know, I will say arbitrary in how it, you know, plays out. It plays out as just almost like following a set of instructions almost. Like, I feel like there is just, I could look online and search how to win Age of Mythology, and it would tell me, build X villagers, send X of them to wood, X of them to gold, X of them to faith, build X of these units, win, and then it would just be that. It would just be a math problem that you would solve, but based on, like, the rates that are really obtuse and hard to measure. You know, you can't think of them, like, you can't calculate them in real time, which this game is. And yeah, I do think though, like, I get why the RTS genre, you know, genres like JRPGs, you know, they still persist, you know, and I do think that, you know, if you knew the strategies, if you came to love this game, then you would think, okay, well, I know that there's this strategy, and so there'll be this high level, you know, meta gameplay of, okay, this strategy is the best, but there's also this strategy that could counter it or whatever. But then, I don't know, I feel like it does also, like, you look at the units, and it just does rely too much on, like, a rock, paper, scissors kind of, okay, myth units beat heroes, heroes beat infantry, and infantry beat myth units or whatever, or archers beat this unit, this counter archers beat this other archer unit. And it does feel like, okay, you could call rock, paper, scissors a game, or you could call it a completely fair way of randomly deciding a victor, you know. So yeah, I think it is, like, you could say, okay, like, if you were a publication and you were saying, and you know that there is an RTS genre that people like there's a really, despite the flaws that you see in it, I think it would be a bit misleading to say, I don't know, this one guy thinks it's a 4 out of 10, which is me in this case. I'll agree with Harry that it's a 4 out of 10. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I do enjoy a lot of it though. Like, I think the theme is strong, even though it's a bit heavy-handed. You know, it is good. You know, I like that there's a lot of detail in it. You know, as you select units, they will say Greek words that I can understand. You know, fun fact. You know, they say things like, "Oh, ready," or "Be careful," or "I'm listening," or whatever. And you're like, "Oh man, that's neat." You know, I do like that, and I don't know. I feel like I would have a lot more fun with it if we were all in the same room playing, and you would get that, like, moment to moment. You know. Players bouncing off of each other, you know, talking in the same room, and it would be engaging that way. And then you would also, you know, follow the sort of set of instructions to, you know, win the base building game and then win the combat game. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot to think about in terms of how it doesn't engage a player that will tell you a lot about what you do find engaging in other games. Like, for instance, okay, I'm going on for too long, but I'll just say this one last point. Like a lot of the skill comes from just remembering where things are in menus. It's almost like aiming in like a first-person shooter. You just have to aim, just to like quickly go to a villager, click on them, and then click on their whatever, build this thing, and then place it down somewhere. But compare that to aiming in Call of Duty and shooting someone in the head, killing them. Which one is more satisfying? Which one would you do, over and over again just for the sake of its own, just baked in, like, enjoyment in the thing? Like, I'd know which one.
I often find myself just clicking on the fort buildings because of the sound they make. It's a powerful sound.
I do think someone could take, RTS elements and do it better.
Right.
Yeah,
Are we ready to move on?
There's an appeal to it for the people that like it. I'm done. I can't speak anymore. I need to breathe. Yeah, go ahead. Move on.
Yeah. All right. So the film I picked was not one that I had seen before I picked it, but was one I'd been meaning to see for a while, ever since seeing like a few scenes of it in a history lesson. And it is The Pianist by, unfortunately, Roman Polanski. So it's based on the like real memoirs of this Polish Jewish musician, sort of struggling to survive in first it's just when a few laws get introduced when the Nazi occupation of Poland, and then it builds up to being in a Warsaw ghetto, and then when that gets destroyed, and sort of trying to like hide when he shouldn't be around, basically, and then the actual like conflict as Poland was recaptured and all of that, and the like struggle to I don't know, it's I feel like I've done a bad job of really saying what it is, but it's
I think. Well, sorry, Jordan. I just think, I think it is, this the easiest way to summarize it is, a Holocaust drama, and which is the IMDb tags, but it is like, it really shows like a long, like zoomed out, the
real strength of it is that kind of the way it, I say slides into that sort of thing, but just the transition,
I see
the
what
kind
you're
of
saying.
world around it. Like some of the strongest moments are like just when he's in the Warsaw ghetto, and then he will step over a body on the floor, or there'll be this child who's like saying "Father, Father" or whatever to this corpse on the ground, and that's not part of the plot. That's just part of the world he's having to inhabit around. Just these small little moments in these shots, especially in like the Warsaw ghetto, that you just realize just the picture of such a horrible place to be, and just those little bits that create this.
You also get the feeling as you go on that as the what's what I'm looking for here, as the story gets worse and worse for Jewish people in Poland, as their lives get more and more worse, you get the impression that they get more desensitized to like death. So there'll be scenes later on in the film where they're in the ghetto and they're just walking around, and then there'll be bodies, and then they'll just walk past them as if it's become commonplace, and it's just usual now, and part of their lives to just be living in a place where there are dead bodies just on the floor that haven't been cleared up or taken care of. They're just there, and no one's doing anything about them. It's terrible.
Yeah, I think the film is very long. Is something 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I think that I will say an upside of this. There are downsides to it being that long, but the upside is that it gives you this like really like beginning to end look at how the entire sort of series of events happened. You know, one leading into the next, giving you like this great look at the history of the time. You know, very accurate, I assume, and very detailed as well. You really like.
But what's different about this film is it's all done through the protagonist. So unlike a more kind of, it's not a very objective. It's a very subjective point of view.
Yeah,
so
it's very emotional,
everything you're
say that.
seeing is through I don't know what Adrian Brody's character is called, but he is essentially pretty much in every scene, and everything he's
Spielman.
seeing is what you're seeing. Like you never. There are moments where it shifts, but it's pretty much always through him and his family, especially early on, and then.
Yeah, I mean it's because it is like based off his. Would you say memoirs? It is his like point of view that they tried to as like closely adapt as they could.
Yeah, so I think it's very authentic, but I don't think it's not like it's telling. It's not like it's like a documentary counting everything that happened.
But at the same time,
like he never goes to a concentration camp. It kind of he gets taken away, and then in a sense you as the audience get taken away from his family.
Is that a massive issue? Because I feel like any other film that was about any other film that was about the Holocaust would kind of like Schindler's List give you like an in-depth view of concentration camps, and this one takes a much more different route where it's about a character trying to survive in Warsaw rather than in a concentration camp and what he gets up to and how.
That's what makes this different.
Yeah, this is a real strength that I'd say is that kind of just how you see this guy's life basically, and the moment where he escapes and his family is taken away, and that's sort of that's kind of that bit, and you don't see what happens to them, and all that kind of is very like grounding and realistic. A lot of the realism as well probably comes from Roman Polanski himself was in a ghetto like this when he was a child, and so he himself has had to escape from this situation. So like some of it comes from his own experiences, and so the bit where Spielman it does escape from the ghetto when the person tells him don't run. In actual life, Spielman was told to run at that point, but it was something that Roman Polanski was told when he was escaping was don't run. So that little moment is from Roman Polanski.
Yeah. I mean, Harry said it's not like a documentary, and I feel like on one hand you could have taken, or you could make a documentary, you could take a more historical, more factual approach.
They exist. They
exist, exactly. And I think in being like a personal story, it gives you, like, you feel the weight of it a lot more. Like the first hour of this film is really miserable. And I'm like, it's a Holocaust drama. It should be miserable because it was a miserable time. And so I think like I would show this in like a history lesson, you know. I don't know what the rating of the film is. It shows a guy getting thrown off a building at one point, and so I can't imagine it's, you know, PG.
It's 15.
So yeah, you know, what year would that be?
So the bit of
year 10, year 11, you know, you'd show this. I think you would really understand like the weight of the Holocaust, you know, really get like a human sense of the tragedy through this film. More than so just saying like facts about it would convey, in my opinion.
Yeah, because like a good example of that would be like you could just have as a fact that what's his name spent this amount of time basically locked in a room where someone occasionally came and gave him food. Like it's a sentence, you know, it's a fact, kind of paints a bit of a picture like, oh, that's a long time to be like, you know, without much human contact. But showing it in a film, just this guy in a room, another day sort of thing, just kind of, you know, it doesn't say for how long it is, but it's a really long time you feel for him to be without this human interaction, and that's what you really begin to feel as the film goes on, is that just how little interaction he basically gets with everyone. That his life is kind of now he's once he does escape, he is now in this well, not particularly nice room, but he's in a place where he can actually lie down and be on a comfortable bed. But he's like he's lost almost all his contact with the outside world.
Yeah, and I know Tony will probably comment on this in a minute because he did mention length of the runtime earlier, but the fact that you really get this impression that time passes and that it really is he slips into a routine and it's like every day is exactly the same and he really has no freedom. And I think the fact that they were able to create that effect from a film that, to me, I don't really feel like it dragged. For a film that was over 2 hours and a half, I did feel like, I was still hooked, I was still engaged with it. For a film where you get this feeling that time is passing and that it does feel long, it doesn't feel like it drags, which, to get that combination, that balance, I think is just a really, really, really good job. Terrific stuff.
I would say drags is a harsh word, but yeah, I don't know. For this, I definitely, very early on, like for the first hour or so, I was like, this is very miserable. But at the same time, like I felt really bad. I felt really like uncertain about whether I should come at it and critique it from the point of view of being like a film, being a piece of entertainment. When at that point I was like, this seems to just have its primary goal be to describe through the medium of film how horrible it was to be, a Jew at this time, and to go through that tragedy. And so I think but I'll say my opinion on that did change later on, and so there are things where I was like, okay, from a film standpoint, I feel like the middle is probably where it's the most, most engaging, and through at the beginning and at the end, it sort of does stretch a bit, in my opinion.
Yeah. I have a really strange interaction with this film because I'd watched it once a few years ago and I barely remembered any of it. And when I went back to rewatch it the second time a couple of weeks ago, I felt like in some way the first half is harder to watch than the second half.
Definitely.
Which doesn't really when you explain to someone who hasn't seen the film what happens in the first half, what happens in the second half, I feel like they'd say, no, the second half's got to be worse. But it's the fact that in the first half, you know what's going to end up because we all had the history lessons. We all know what happened.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that you see, okay, things are slightly bad for Jewish people in Poland now. And then next scene, it's slightly worse. And you just know where it's going to end up. It just gets worse and worse and worse.
It's this slight, like, decline over, like, I'll give it that, it uses the fact that it is long to the advantage to show this, like, decline over time. And the worst part is that people have the denial, people have the, okay, but it's not going to get worse than this, at every step in the way. And they're like, oh, no, you have that sense of dread that it gets to, like, as worse as it can humanly get. And you just have that sense of dread, that sense of misery. As people, like at the start of the film, the pianist, he's has that really nice dinner, with his family, and you're like, oh no, like through the end, you get that sense of like he gets put through hell basically, But it is, it's never a sudden change. It's always like a step, an almost like okay, like incremental step from the last place where he was,
So, I think they like for the first half, one of the like really horrible things is just the way that they're kind of treated and bossed around. Just the like scene where they're waiting so that they can like cross the street basically, and then just the German soldiers force them to dance, and like other bits where there's one of them walking in the street and they get like told that they can't walk on the street basically, and all the terrible stuff, and just that almost every scene with a German soldier and a Jew, you feel like if the Jewish person speaks, they'll probably be hit in the face, or there'll be some kind of immediate violence, and that's just kind of, it's almost, as it goes on, becomes almost a sort of normal thing. And just and again the bit where the person is told to stand but they can't because they're in a wheelchair, and so get chucked out, of the window, like the all of those bits, like the really, because it's horrible to see that done to people, and also that these people are doing it as well. That in this situation, people who I don't know,
I feel like the decision to not subtitle the Germans really kind of gives
Yeah.
you the kind of the very subjective point of view of the protagonist, and the fact that he speaks a very limited amount of German, and you don't know what they're saying, which kind of adds that fear to like you don't know what you can't get a read on them. You can't it almost takes away their humanity by they're just this kind of mysterious other that are doing these horrific things.
Yeah. And I do think that's interesting, because I was worried first of all, like, oh my god, have I messed up? Like, was I meant to get a subtitle version and understand what the Germans were saying? But actually, year 9 German GCSE, got a C like 4 years ago. I can pick up on when he says, ich bin pianist, and I was like, oh man, he's saying he stutters. You can pick up that he says I am, and then he changes his mind. He says I was a pianist, and that's when the German officer says, come and play this piano. Like, very limited, German knowledge. It's not like I understood it. It's just like odd word I caught.
Yeah,
there are sometimes.
A lot of it is just from the cues they give afterwards and what they do.
Yeah, and
I did get some subtitles though for that scene between him and that German officer.
Yeah, because there's a lot of conversation. That is just the focus of it.
That was the final bit where I was like, you know what, they're probably saying some interesting things in German. I should get some subtitles.
But at the same time, like, I think you can get a lot of the thing just through their intonation and through just the actions, just the fact that he just sits there, listening to him. I think he says a few things and he just leaves, and it really tells almost in a way, because you can't understand it, a silent story, really.
No,
really well done.
that's exactly what it is. It's the fact that even though they're speaking words that you can't understand, just through their acting and their behaviour, you can tell what the story is. You could tell that there's this character who's in fear of his life and thinks he's been caught and he's about to get killed. He sits down and plays the piano, and then the German officer there, he's got a tear to his eye, and he's there going, "This is actually beautiful." I mean, you can just tell from the way that they're acting what they're feeling, what they're going through, rather than having the need for dialogue to explain that. So I'm actually kind of glad they didn't put subtitles in there. I think it helps, makes it more effective.
Yeah. There's one. Actually, I don't know.
No, go on. That's all right.
Says it. Well, it's like one of the final things that that officer says. It's when he gives the last food parcel, and I can't remember because I imagine that's a German subtitle moment, but that's because Spielmann asks, why are you doing this, basically, and then the German officer says, I can't remember exactly, but it's like we have. God wants us to survive, that's what we have to believe, or something like that. It's just a very kind of interesting line. That's like the one bit which I imagine, because I got subtitles up at that point, so I lost track of, from that point onwards, what was like said in German and not. But I think that's a very interesting line. I feel. Anyway, that's the one bit.
I also feel like there are some moments in the film where the film kind of knows that you're invested in it, so it kind of it sort of hits you in the head with what you expect to happen. And there's particularly a moment, I don't know if you got this, where it's in the first half still, and Spielmann's just walking around, and there's an old man with like a group of children who comes along, and I think he asked one of the German officers for like a cigarette or something, and he's dancing around, and I genuinely thought the officer was just going to kill him on the spot there. No, he just lights his cigarette, and the moment of relief that this guy hasn't killed this person just for asking for a cigarette is just like, oh god, it's a relief. And also the part right towards the end of the film where Spielmann meets the German officer, and the guy turns out to be all right, and he just wants to keep him safe and keep him hidden. And the second time I watched it, I did know what was going to happen. I couldn't remember a lot of the film, but I didn't remember key moments like that. But the first half you watch it, I got the impression for about half of that scene that, oh no, this is the end for him.
Yeah,
But then
exactly.
you kind of, but then you sort of get the reversal at some point, and you realise that actually no, he is going to survive. Actually, that's not even. Actually, I was also going to mention there's a scene even later on where the first and second time I watched it, I thought, oh Jesus, this isn't going to happen. Where he comes out wearing, and you
Oh my
know
God,
that this
the German
shit's going to
coat.
happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's the fact that when he hands him his jacket, you just know, oh, for fuck's sake, someone's going to mistake him as like a
Yeah,
Nazi
yeah.
officer, and then he goes out,
Yeah.
and then you think, oh, don't tell me this is the end for him. I mean, there's a part of you
Yeah,
that thinks,
yeah.
no way, that there's no way you're going to get to this point and you're going to kill off this
Yeah.
character. But because
If-
you're
if-
emotionally
if-
invested, you
Yeah.
think, oh, they're going to kill this guy.
It's got such a great line around there as well. I'm looking at the quotes now, but yeah, just the like.
Why the
no,
coat?
please, I'm
Why the
Polish,
fucking
not
coat?
German. Then why the fucking coat? And then just I'm cold, which is such
Yeah,
a brilliant
there's-
kind of.
Yeah. It has so many
Yeah.
great like short lines like that just like directly deliver like the experience of the
Yeah,
emotion
yeah.
of how they were
'Cause
feeling at
that's
the
just-
time.
Yeah, that's just like. Kind of, it's almost kind of we're all men. We all get cold. Yes, this is the coat of the wrong side, but it keeps me warm. You know, it's.
I would have been really mad though if he had been killed. Like even though
yeah.
maybe I could have seen it from a realistic point of view, from like a annoying like story plot hole point of view, I would have been like he could have just taken off the coat. He could have seen that they were like Russian soldiers and just taken it off. I would have been mad, but I appreciate the way it turned out. I think it works really well.
Yeah, I've looked up the actual quote I was trying to remember, and it's Spielsman says, "I don't know how to thank you," and then Hosenfeld, the German, says, "Thank God, not me. He wants us to survive." Well, that's what we have to believe. Just another brilliant
Powerful
line
quote.
about kind
Very
of
good.
yeah.
And there's a lot of like really strong quotes early in this film that one's really like sounds really powerful and dramatic, but at the same time like the ones like I because I'm cold, or like when he just walks into like the room after escaping from somewhere else and he just says, "Can I have some bread?" And you're like, God, it's so simple, and so I think the performance is really strong, you know, of the main guy.
Yeah.
Especially in the second half, his characterization becomes just fantastic. Just the
You really get the sense of how like everything is just wearing down him, like how he develops that that limp.
He
He gets the
limp,
beard.
yeah.
Oh my God.
Everything just looks. Yeah, he's just sort of becoming almost more and more broken, and so is the world around him. Like one of the filming techniques that I used throughout it is that there's a lot of color at the start of the film that like slowly gets drained more and more out of it until you like reach the end where everything is basically just shades of grey.
Yeah. Oh, speaking
very
of,
good.
the cinematography in this film is just outstanding. There are some. I think the first one that you see that really did have an impact on me is just after he's escaped and he's walking through the streets of Warsaw, and there's just luggage and suitcases and all belongings that have been thrown out of windows, and they're just there, and he's walking and crying, and it's snowing, and it's just fantastic, fantastic imagery. And then later on, when he jumps over the wall outside the hospital, it was the picture that you sent on the chat, Jonathan,
That one,
before.
it's great.
It's just breathtaking. That's what it is.
It just zooms more and more out, and it's just this absolute destruction. That's just. Oh, and as well, when like the tank is shooting in his like apartment, and just that whole shot of him like just trying to escape. And like there's just so much like debris and fog, and not fog, but like what do you call it? Just,
Rubble.
Yeah, rubble, and like all the like grey particles in the air, and it just like I was sitting there and almost felt myself like I was choking on the like all of the
very
all of the stuff. It was just so real looking.
Yeah, interesting that it does like really pick up in the action towards the end of the film. Like this is going to be an odd comparison, but it did when he's escaping from that one building because of the tank. It almost reminded me of like Blade Runner, you know, the end of the original one where he's being chased by this literally like unstoppable force, you know.
Yeah. I actually think as well that that's got to be another benefit of having a film that's so long. It's the fact that you can literally, like you said earlier, Tony, you can literally explore the beginning all the way to the end, and you can just track the entire, basically just how everything occurred from the point of this one character. And the fact that you spend so long in this world, towards the end, you just really are completely and utterly invested into this one character.
Yeah. Yeah. Harry, do you have agreements, disagreements with?
Yeah, you guys have
statements?
you guys have said some good things. I think I don't like the second half of the film as much as the first half. I would like to kind of explain why. Because obviously it's a very upsetting film, and especially the first half, because you have that gradual deterioration in both the kind of the color. Everything gets darker and smaller and grimmer for the family, and the way that kind of family dynamic works is really effective, and like at delivering like lines like you said of like severe pathos, like the father never kind of giving up hope, and like the differing attitudes, and the way that kind of like that gradual decline of their well-being and like the surroundings around them, and just moments where he'll be walking home and there'll be a boy trying to crawl under a wall, just incredibly upsetting kind of images that really kind of convey like the abject horror of what's happening to the Polish Jews. But for me, the moment where Adrian Brody's character kind of gets, he's amazing as well, by the way, he gets kind of taken away from his family. I feel like the film, it's then a very different film, because it's less about the average family and in surviving the Holocaust, and now it's about one man's experience, which was incredibly kind of niche, and it's something I hadn't seen before, which credit where credit's due, but it's also it's very different from the kind of traditional Jewish experience in the Holocaust. And towards the end, where it was him kind of crawling around buildings and like kind of getting shot at by tanks, and like they're trying to burn down the buildings, and he's kind of like being kept in that room by trying to be kept safe, and like that time where he smashes the plates, all that stuff. It's good, but it's a very different film to the first hour and a half, and it's definitely a lot less effective for me, because early on it's not just him. He's kind of, and what's happening to him is happening to everyone. But then it does just become about one man and his survival. Also, I know it did happen, and you can't criticize a true story too much. But the kind of the one German officer that he kind of plays the piano with, I kind of it's a weird note.
I don't know. I like it. I appreciate that story quite a bit, just because I feel like there is the perfectly reasonable tendency to show Nazis as like the Wolfenstein, like cartoonishly evil guys, you know. And I'm not saying that there weren't people who were Nazis who were monsters, which we do see in this film. But at the same time, it does show that there is a range. There is a people who are like really playing into it, people who are just abusing their power that they have over people that they view as lesser. And there are other people that will just will like say, hey, when they are asked where are we going, they will give them directions, up until right at the end where it shows the guy who will put his his job, his life on the line to save someone. I like that range. I think it was more nuanced and more believable to show it like in that way.
I think that officer is one of the two Nazis who have ever kind of been forgiven by the Jewish people. The other being Oskar Schindler. The difference with Schindler's List is the whole film is about Oskar Schindler and kind of and what happened in his circumstance, as well as painting a wider portrait of what was happening during the Holocaust. I don't know. It just feels like a strange note to end on. This kind of this very touch. It's a very effective moment, but it left me feeling slightly uncomfortable. I can't really put my finger on why.
Well, I really like it because up until that point, it's just gradually. I say gradually. It was gradually, and then it's just hit rock bottom for him, and he lives in a very devastating situation. But then there's one person who comes along and offers him a small, like a glimmer of hope, like a ray of sunshine, if that makes sense. Which I think is uplifting in a sense.
So I find it such an interesting well, you have the moment where he, like, drops the thing and you follow like the water falling out of the can, and then it moves up and you see the shoes and then the uniform.
I know.
And then
Oh
Such a
yeah, that's
sense of
so
dread.
good.
but it's just
Yeah.
such an interesting moment because you had basically this kind of the epitome of what you'd think of when you see a Nazi soldier, and perhaps like I don't want to say like with his large nose, you know, the epitome of a Jew or whatever, because that sounds. But you have these two characters who have been. One is placed as this like captain under this idea, and one who is like less than a slave, and it's just these two men in this sort of battlefield just looking at each other, and then I mean, not quite having a conversation, but like a moment of humanity. Is just so interesting.
And I would
And-
say, oh sorry, Johnny, do you have something to say? Sorry. You go
Well,
ahead.
his whole thing makes it so interesting when like one of the few scenes that is not with Spielman is the one where you've got like walking out of the concentration camp, and you see this like large cage where they've got all the German soldiers in, which includes I keep on forgetting his name, but Captain Wilm Hosenfeld, and it's a sort of role reversal in a sense that you then sort of realise that almost in a same way. I mean, not nearly to the same extent, but like being in a Russian prisoner of war camp, that is where that character died. Is almost a similar sort of. Now they're all in a prison. Now they're lower class citizens. They're the ones being mistreated. Just almost the way it moves on.
Yeah, and just to say that when Harry said that there's that definite split between the first and second half, I think when Ethan said, "Oh, the first half is worse," I would agree with that, because I see the split as in the beginning everything is like it is the gradual decline of okay, this is how it was, how it got from how it we talked about how conditions got worse over time basically, but then the story switches focus into being almost a more hopeful, like it's a story about how this one guy made it through and how he survives, and how he ultimately did survive. And that's why I think even though the second half is a lot more dangerous, more he is in physically harsher conditions, it is still like you have more of okay, but you're hoping for him to make it. You have that, but what if he makes it? Hope in your mind. Whereas with the first half, you're just like you just know it's going to get worse from here in your head, and that's what I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you've done well to explain why the first half is more effective. I feel like there's more. It's definitely more. Everything feels more inevitable, and therefore like way sadder and way more real. Whereas, like I say, that this is an experience of a single man and what he went through, and I find that sad, but I find the kind of what happened to everyone else and like the truth of what happened far sadder. And seeing that made me more upset and made me more engaged.
but-
Like
but
it's
at the
like, what do
same-
you want from this kind of film, really? That's kind of
There's
the question.
one bit I just want to raise, and this feels like a reasonably good time to do it, but just the woman that is just saying, "Why did I do it?"
Yeah,
Oh
That's-
yeah.
Just and then you find out why, and it's just so.
It's also the fact that around that same point, just what some of the lines that some of the characters say are just they're just so sad, because I think if I remember correctly, there's one character who says something like "Oh, they won't dispose of us. We're like a good workforce," or something like that. When you know full well what they're about to march into.
Yeah, and I mean it's a line that is said after that when he's like with the few that managed to stay behind, where just like is the person talking about where the train's going off to, and it's just they're exterminating us.
Yeah, that line
That's
really has
just-
really stuck with me, because
Yeah.
you can tell like in his face like he is completely just
There's
the way
also a
that
scene.
situation is coming through.
Yeah. There's also a scene as well, which I think shows just how like well, don't get me wrong, it's an extremely dramatic film, but I don't think that it's like over dramatic. And it's this scene where I think they're walking back after like a day's work or something, and some Nazi officer just comes along and just and I think the entire scene is pretty much told. Oh, maybe not, but I feel like it's told through predominantly one camera angle. And this officer comes along, and they're all in a line, the workers, and he just picks them out, and then just tells them to lie on the ground, and then he shoots them all, and it's just a scene that plays out, and it doesn't go into slow motion, it doesn't do anything like that. It's just a scene that happens, and I think it just has a lot more weight and
It is
because
just
of it.
matter of fact. Yeah.
For the final person, who is the like one character in that line that you knew, he then goes to shoot the
Has to reload.
has to
Oh
reload,
God,
runs out of
yeah.
ammo.
There's a terrible part. There's a terrible part in Schindler's List where Ralph Fiennes picks out a guy who isn't making, I think, door hinges quickly enough. So he picks him up and he's about to shoot him, and his gun. And it's such a hard scene to watch because the guy's on the floor and he's about to shoot him, but his gun is jammed, and he has to keep trying to fix it. And in the end, he gives up trying to fix his gun and just kicks the guy in the face, and then just walks off, because he can't be bothered to reload the gun and shoot him. Well, thankfully, of course, but it's oh God, it's just really difficult to watch. It's just like that one scene there.
Yeah.
I feel like obviously Schindler's List is the obvious comparison. Schindler's List tells a very individual story of a single man who decides to a Nazi who decides to help an Oskar Schindler. But through, I feel like the film isn't. If you were splitting up where the camera follows, like how much screen time he actually has, I'd say the film isn't really about just that one man. It's about it does a better job of showing you the kind of the horrible truth of everything, and I feel like that's what the first half of The Pianist does, probably better than Schindler's List, whereas the second half is very radically different and becomes about the character you invested in's own personal survival.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I have to say about that, Harry. No, sorry, Tony. You know what I have to say about that, Harry, because Schindler's List is, of course, the 6th best film ever made, isn't it? Everyone knows that.
I mean, it is one of the most. It's probably when it comes to craft, it's probably one of the best films ever made. Yeah.
I mean, I was just taking a mick out.
I'm never going to watch it again.
It's in my top 10, and you always take the piss out of me because of that.
I mean, I'm personally never going to watch Schindler's List again. But...
Yeah, well, I don't, but it's still one of my favourite films.
Okay.
Sorry, Tony.
Right.
So yeah, I was just gonna say that, like, okay, I think Harry said earlier, like, what do you want out of a film like this, about a film that's about the Holocaust? Like, okay, like, I think that the first half is almost like too sad to watch. Like, I get that there is, brought this up earlier, like, merit in just having an artistic, like, representation of how bad things literally were at the time. But the fact that it is just like, it takes so long for there to be hope in the film, like, it is almost like I will say it's like around an hour in where the pianist says, like, I want to get out of this ghetto or whatever, and it feels like, oh my God, at this point there is like hope that he has some control over the story, he has some form of agency, and that he's got like he might make it, he might make it out of this scenario and then survive. And I do think that it's a bit more reasonable to expect, a character story out of something that is literally called The Pianist, It's not called The Holocaust. It's cool. It's about focusing on this one guy.
Yeah, but through that one guy, you can convey so much more with just the little moments, and that's what the first half does. And the dynamic he has with the characters, I feel like Carrie, he does a good job, Brody. But the fact that he has to carry so many scenes of just him alone doing very little, for me, those didn't work as well. I mean, they just didn't work as well for me. I found the first half more profound and more kind of terrifying. And that's kind of what I wanted.
I would agree that it is more terrifying, but I just think, like, I am more glad to have watched the film because of the second half, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just feel like there could have been less.
Yeah, I do think I will agree with, like, I've talked about length, that there is a lot of just him. He is hiding in one place, and then he goes and hides in another place, and then he goes and hides in another place.
And some
like,
of those scenes, there were like, and like sometimes like there'd be a moment where he looked out the window and saw something, and it's when he sees things, and you know that like from the writer and the director and everyone involved and people who've lived through the Holocaust, they are memories, they are things they have seen, and how shocking they are. But there were moments where it was just him, or just dialogue scenes with characters, and that didn't have those moments, that probably didn't really aid the plot for me anyway.
I don't know. For me, though, I think it almost is like a natural extension of, because like the film, like it at the halfway point, like it focuses on him because the rest of his family is sent off to a concentration camp and is presumably killed. You know, I don't know if they ever come back or whatever, but. And so it makes sense that it's like, yeah, it is literally just come down to the one person that did survive, you know, and focusing on that solitude more.
I think,
I don't know.
Yeah, part of that is almost what makes some of it so terrible, is that like there used to be this whole community in that area. Like, however horrible it was, there was still like this. Those people, their little jokes that they had as well. The one who's like said, "Oh, I hide the propaganda in the Jewish toilets because they're too clean for the Germans." There's and like they have set up this kind of economy in a sense in this little area. It's horrible, but there is actually life there. And then as it goes on, it's just now this handful, and then like half of it just gets killed because that was too many. It just, and then that it does just come down to it is just him from this. However, I think because it's a slightly running thing where they go. I think it's 400,000 Jews in Warsaw is like the first number you hear, and then they go, and that's like mentioned when they're saying how they're going to put them all into a ghetto, and then someone just says, "Oh, 360,000 will all fit easily." It's you have a feeling of this number ticking down of how many there are there, and it's I don't know, and I feel a good conclusion to that is the whole bit where it is kind of
zoom on
just
one
him.
guy, you know, the one guy left standing.
And once it becomes like him stuck just in this in basically a battlefield, that then sort of feels almost it generalizes itself more to just war in general, and having to almost be a civilian trying to survive. Just the bit where he goes up to a tap and then there's no water because there wouldn't, and he has to go around and like is drinking from these horrible buckets just because he needs food, he needs water. Everything is just destroyed, everything is grey, there's just bodies everywhere on the street that have to be burnt, and it just, I don't know. So I can see the point of it. It does just become his story, but for me, it also becomes at that point this could be almost any modern war.
Yeah, it's a good story. Is my feeling, and it feels like a logical like conclusion from the earlier events set up. You know.
Tony, can I ask you a question?
Who?
You can ask you a question.
Who would you want to ask a question, Ethan?
Well,
you, Tony.
Me? All right,
yes,
yeah.
you.
Shoot.
I'm glad that you really like this film, but I also find it a bit strange that you did, because, correct me if I'm wrong, in the past you tend to, you've not been a massive fan of films that have like negative emotions and things that are generally
Ethan,
miserable.
That is like literally like I was in the first hour of this film, I was so like, I don't want to be watching this, you know, this is too miserable for me. But I think if it had been a fictional story, not even just telling a true story from someone's memoirs, but if it had been a fictional story about someone coming up with a really sad series of events, then I probably would have I wouldn't have felt the need to stick through it. But the fact that it was like historical, you know, I felt like, no, this is something that actually happened. And also, you know, I've got an obligation to watch it because we do a podcast about things. I was like, all right, I'll stick with it. And I think it just goes to show how much weight I put on endings, because up and through the entire story I was like, oh my, it was too intense for me. Like, I'll definitely agree, you know, the first half is way too terrifying. It is almost like an overdose of misery. Like, there's very little Like there are a few sparks of humor in there, but other than that, it just becomes like you get so desensitized to it.
Yeah.
And so I did have the dilemma of, okay, like that makes sense. Like as much as I don't like it, that does make sense. But then it comes to the ending. It comes to you get the spark of hope. An hour in, I'll give it. I will say that I probably would have liked to have felt more motivation to watch the film through all the way earlier on, but nonetheless you do get that motivation. You do get the sense that eventually, like, what if he makes it, and then it does come to the ending and he makes it. He's just there playing the piano, and you get the sense that he survived, he made it through, and literally just in that like instant I was like, this film has gone from like a 3 out of 10 to like an 8 out of 10. Like just from that on its own, just because it is the thing of like, okay, should I put so much value on endings? They're only a small part of the film, right? It's like, well, for the rest of me looking back on this film, I'll think about how it's a story about how he survived versus, even though despite the tragedy that he accurately shows. And so yeah, I am surprised that I like it as much as I did. But Ethan, this is a post-Spirited Near Tony. Anything can happen. Yeah, so is there anything else we have left to say?
Really quickly, before we come to ratings, can we talk about Polanski and what people think about that?
Okay.
Yeah, that was what I was about to say, because I feel I want to get into why. Because when I introduced this, I said, unfortunately directed by Roman Polanski. Which is because he probably should have been in jail instead of directing this film. Which is awkward, to say the least.
Sure where the lines are drawn for morality when it comes to enjoying this film.
Yeah, it's strange. I don't feel like this film should have been made, but I'm also glad that it exists.
That's my kind of contradiction with it. That it's down to your own personal kind of code of ethics, but he should never have been allowed to make this film, and people, well-respected people, should not have agreed to make this film, and then critics should not have allowed this film to. I don't know, because when are you punishing a piece of art due to I don't know. It's a weird contradiction of, I'm so glad that this exists, but I despise the person who made it and think that they should never have been allowed to make it.
Yeah,
and we should not give them credit for making it.
Yeah, and it's even more difficult when some of like the stuff in the film is like wrapped up with his own life as the child.
It's his own personal kind of tragedy.
I will say though that for me personally, I like knowing a little bit about his crimes before. I don't think it was too hard to separate that and just watch the film in isolation. Like, fair enough if we were critics at the time and were deciding whether to like publish a review that says go see this film and support a stat rapist, but now it's we're watching this film illegally, just on dodgydownloads.net, not giving him any money, even though I assume again the rest of the cast did a great job of not being criminals and also making a great film. So yeah, I think for me at least, I don't think I'll do any like my score subtract however many points because he's evil kind of thing, just because I don't think it impacted my experience of the film. And I think that's just what I will try, and that is my baseline, like the experience I had with the thing. Like if I was watching the film and I couldn't stop thinking about if there were obvious signs that he was a bad man, very unsubtly in it, then I probably would have felt that more. But
it's not quite Woody Allen, where this is more Polanski's kind of pain versus his kind of. It's not like his personality is put across in this film. It's more his pain.
It's not like a Kevin Spacey where you can see like, oh, he just is a bad guy and I'm watching him be a bad guy and he wasn't acting,
I was just about to say,
it puts it in a new context.
Yeah, this is something that is portraying the pain that he himself felt and like millions felt. It's no, it is different because we're talking.
it's I think it's easier to watch this film than it is to watch something like American Beauty, for instance, because of what you just said, Tony. The fact that the director is always in the background, you don't actually see him on the film, so it's easy enough to kind of distinguish the work.
And I don't think it like comes through, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think The Pianist as a film is harmed by the crimes he did. Whether it deserves success and whether Roman Polanski deserved to benefit from that success despite being a fugitive, that's an argument that you can definitely, make.
Yeah.
Also, we put way too much emphasis on the director. Like this has got amazing performances. It's shot really well. And the cinematographer is on a script level. It's brilliant. The music. It's not just the director. Like, a lot of people worked really hard to make this great film. It's not just about one man. One man shouldn't ruin it for everyone else. Although this was made so many years after, you kind of have to question the ethics of the people who decide to make it.
I think I completely agree with you, Harry. I don't think you should punish a film when a lot of other people worked really hard on it. Why should you take away that art from someone else, like people working on, I don't know, makeup or on the camera work? It's like they were a part of it as well, but we shouldn't
imagine if Lawrence Dietz's crimes came out, that he had been a massive drug dealer, right? But, and it came down as Ethan should have known this before hiring him on as a cameraman for by the way, Lawrence Dietz isn't actually a drug dealer. I just want to say that. Ethan should have known this before hiring him on as a cameraman. If it had come down hard on something that you would put a lot of effort into, you would have felt like, hang on, this isn't, you would make the argument that it wasn't fair, I feel.
At some point, I'll probably be testifying against him in court.
These claims are alleged. This is a fictional podcast. Nothing stated by the audio members reflects our actual opinions. You can't use this in court because I said.
Okay, can we?
That's legal.
Should we get on to? I'll start off again. I'm really glad I picked this film to watch. I've been meaning to for ages, and it feels weird to say positive things. I'm glad to have seen this depressing thing. It's such a brilliant creation, and telling a story from a point of view that is separate from my own. Right at the very beginning, where they're huddled around the radio, listening to the Britain declaring war on Germany. I've heard that clip so many times, from feeling like a British person born ages afterwards, going, yeah, we decided that was a bad thing. But it's completely different than sitting there in this Polish family's room, finally going, we're not alone. It was a completely different thing. And then it then moves on, this depiction of the decline of the living conditions, and this horrible picture of what people can do to people when there's this idea of power involved, or when you can spin a story to vilify these people. It's I think for me it's a 9. It's difficult to score as a sort of I don't know, it's because it's almost I feel like I have learned a lot watching this about just it's almost kind of, I guess, the darker side of humanity, and I guess a bit later some of the brighter points of it. But just it's a massive message in why to be aware of things that can turn us into such horrible monsters. Today I saw a news article about how it's what is it that. I think the number was something like 1 in 20 deny the Holocaust in, I think it was in Britain or something like that. A crazy amount of people who just question it or don't believe it, or massively underestimate the Europe, and just reading that article after having watched this film, it was just so horrible to see in a way that it can just be dismissed. There are people who are just like don't treat it. So it made me so glad that this does exist. This very very real feeling film that hopefully can reach people for like, well, hopefully even like generations to come and go, you know. I don't know. I've got off the track of giving a score to this film. Just 9, maybe a 10, but 9.
Funny. What would you think of? I wanted to ask Jonathan a question. What would you think of the Grand Budapest Hotel if Hitler had directed it? Like, what would be your opinion of it?
I mean that would put us into a whole another debate about like artists and their creation, and I feel like as we are like
departure from Hitler's own, I assume, worldview.
I don't want to get into my feelings of like Hitler and the artworks he created, especially like not 2 hours and 10 minutes deep into a podcast.
Yeah, if we keep going on, this podcast is going to be as long as The Pianist.
All right, everyone gets 2 minutes to wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to go?
Ethan, you'd seen this before. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll go through it. So I really think this film is fantastic for a couple of reasons. I think the main one being is that this film sort of it ingrains itself into you so much that whenever anything happens to the central character, you sort of expect the worst in a sense. Like there's a part where the guy gives an address that says, hey, if you ever need any help or something, blah blah blah, you go to an address, and you know that this guy is somewhat trustworthy, but you just think that the cynic inside of you just goes, no, if he goes there, something bad's going to happen. And it's because you care about this character so much and you just want him to survive, because you really, really, I mean, it's the fact that so many unjust things have happened to him and that entire religion during the course of this film that you want him to live throughout. So, and also I understand completely where Harry's coming from, but I really like this story, and I really like the fact that it delves off in a direction that you almost don't really expect, and it is about this one man trying to stay on and survive instead of going to some concentration camp like a lot of other Holocaust films in the past. I think it has a really unique perspective. So I went into this thinking I was going to give it an 8, but just talking about it has made me want to give it a 9, so I'll give it that.
Harry, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll give it. I don't know. I'm between 2 ratings, and it might change on another viewing. Although I don't think I really want to view the film again. Tony, can you go and then I'll go?
All right, I'll go.
I'm very unsure.
I'm very surprised that I like this film as much as I do, and it is odd for me to use the word like, because again, my initial things were so like, all right, this is depressing for the sake of historical accuracy, and I see the merit in that, but it doesn't feel right for me to put something like that on the same scale as fucking Tower Heist or whatever, and so it would be a bit weird. But at the same time, the ending pulled it around to be more enjoyable as like a traditional story, essentially, where you can get invested in a character and want for him to survive. And there are a lot of things that I definitely forgive because it follows a true story, which, by the way, I feel like is a lot better delivered. Or the fact that it's a true story like impacts the story better than it did for City of God, in my opinion, because in this it felt like, okay, it makes more sense that it was more, say, drawn out towards the end, or more slow build up in towards the beginning, whereas City of God felt like, okay, it's just a real event that happened to feel like a story. This felt, it felt like real, and you always got that coming through. And yeah, I think I will go with an 8 out of 10. I'm very glad to have watched this, and I do like the story, which is odd to say, because I look back at it and I'm like, oh man, despite the tragedy, despite, you know, it conveying the horrors of the Holocaust so strongly and so almost too much, to the point, like, I would say I would have probably enjoyed it more if there was just a tiny bit more hope, you know. But I understand the not wanting to compromise on the horrificness of it. Like, that is perfectly reasonable to me, and I think by being historically accurate, it gets a pass that I wouldn't give other films, you know. And yeah, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Like, I'm just so glad that, you know, The Pianist made it, you know, that he survived this his worst period of human history. Terrible period, you know. And I'm glad that it's there. Here is like an emotional, like, almost artifact of the time, you know.
I also just want to mention really, really quickly, I'm sorry. This is in no way defending what Polanski did. I just want to get that across. But I do give him a couple of points of sympathy, because I'm not sure if all of you know this, but his wife and unborn child were killed by members of the Manson family in the 60s.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing I noticed when looking up about him. That's quite. That's
like I
too
said, you know, I don't know the
famous.
full story, so I think it's better for me to just review it in isolation, if that makes sense. If I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah. Anyway, Harry, what have you decided your score? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have. I think I'm going to give it a very high 7. I think it's a very, very depressing film. I'm rightfully so. Unlike Tony, I've never seen Life is Beautiful, but I think it might be like one of those films that I absolutely despise, because I don't feel like you should make light of such a horrific event. I feel like you should
I
portray
don't
it.
think it makes light of it, though. I think
No. Can you let me finish, please?
Oh, sorry. I was saying.
Okay, you've had your time to speak. I want to wrap this up.
Have my 2
Like,
minutes.
I don't think you should make light. I think the moments of the family together, there was the right amount of kind of like humor and like kind of normality in that, contrasted with the abject horror, especially in the first half of the film. And towards as the film goes on, deteriorates, and the color palette gets kind of darker, you become kind of more desensitized to the violence, which is an interesting kind of filmmaking technique, because it says a lot about how you're now responding to the violence around you. That said, it is 2.5 hours long, and especially in the middle of the film, there is a lot of just silent scenes that kind of lack any real tension. Towards the end, that's definitely built up, and we've spoken about the ending at some kind of length. I do like the ending. I like the beginning a lot. It's the middle of the film where it really stretches out the kind of just this one man on his own, kind of going from place to place trying to survive, and that didn't work as well for me. I feel like the first half is obviously more emotionally distressing, and the third half is definitely more tense, and the second half kind of lacks any of those individual elements. That being said, it is a very high 7, and I still think it's a very powerful film. It's very, very effective at what it tries to convey. I just have a few problems with how it's paced, and I've commented on the perspective and how I prefer. I prefer the kind of the perspective it gives throughout the first half of the film. All right.
Harry, I just want to say, don't shit on Life is Beautiful until you've seen it, because I promise you the comedy does work within the story.
I know, it's just a Holocaust comedy. I don't
but it's also a really good film. Trust me.
Okay, I'll have to see it.
So are we going to talk about what we're doing next year then?
Yeah, can do.
Yep. All right. Next. I promise that we won't. The next one won't be as long as this. These podcasts we're too long now. We need to be more concise. Anyway, I'm going next. Yeah, it's me. I haven't gone in fucking ages. 2007 was my last podcast, which was a very long time ago. Yep. It's been pretty much 9 months since I've actually had an episode. So I'm picking two games that kind of changed the way. One changed everything and one kind of changed nothing. So first of all is Halo Combat Evolved, one of the most revolutionary games. Yep, the meme. I'm picking it finally.
We're finally doing a Halo. It's literally never come up on this podcast before.
It really holds up. I really want to just talk about it finally in depth, and I'm gonna enjoy you guys playing it. And the game that kind of changed nothing was Silent Hill 2. I feel like it's from a game kind of standpoint, yeah, the gameplay's not great, but in terms of if we're talking about story and emotional depth and themes and kind of the way the game's designed, it's almost unprecedented. So many modern games can't do it like they did it back then. And I kind of it says a lot of things about where games could have gone, but they never did. And I'm looking forward to picking it. Although, as I have been saying for like about a year and a half now, it's probably the only controversial thing that I'm going to pick from now on. I don't think Tony's going to like it. I have no idea if Johnny's going to like it, but I'm looking forward to talking about it nevertheless.